Welcome, Danielle. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
That's great. So, as always, we like to start by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also want to acknowledge our ancestors, those who toiled without compassion or compensation, and our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we work together for our collective liberation. So, I want to just start off by having you introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners.
Yes, thank you so much. So my name is Danielle Letang, and I'm currently working as a senior data analyst with the Rural Ontario Institute. But I am recently in this role, and I've had a lot of experience working with provincial and federal governments. I'm currently living in Toronto, but I'm actually from Sault Ste. Marie, and spent a lot of time, in the outdoors with family and friends. And so that sort of motivated me to study the environment, actually. So I did some studies at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, even more cold and snowy than my hometown, but a great place to learn. And then after that, I did some work with federal and provincial governments, but I never felt really satisfied or fulfilled in government positions. And so I had an opportunity to leave my role, and I took that opportunity to pursue other opportunities in different sectors. Unfortunately, that was right before COVID, and so it was a little bit difficult to do some job searching at that time. But eventually, I did come across this posting, and I'm so happy that it's worked out really well for me.
That's great. We're glad that you're in this work. It's definitely really meaningful and rewarding. Can you share with us what the mission and vision is for the Royal Ontario Institute?
Yeah, thank you. Happy to share. So, the Royal Ontario Institute is a charitable organization. We work to build vision, voice, and leadership. And we do that by offering leadership programs for people in the agriculture sector and also for rural youth. We also provide leaders with data and analysis for decision making. And we connect leaders together to create communities of practice around rural opportunities and challenges. And so my role at ROI is leading various data analysis projects. So right now I'm working on a few different projects, a rural community well-being project, a rural ecological footprint project, and also creating digital dashboards and fact sheets that are complementary products that are making more information available for rural communities. And that project is called Rural Ontario Facts. And we have 4 dashboards published right now on various topics. We'll be releasing a housing dashboard very soon. And the idea there is that the dashboards provide information for every census subdivision or every community in Ontario. And the fact sheets provide sort of a summary of rural and urban information at a bit of a higher level. So that's basically ROI, and that's basically what I do there.
That's really cool. So, can you tell us about the origin of their work and how you're disrupting multiple ecosystems across Canada?
Yeah, so ROI has a long history of providing information to rural communities, but this is the first time they've had, a full-time data analyst on staff, and so we're really excited to be doing a lot more work in the data analysis field for rural communities. And big part of this work right now is in data equity. So there is sort of this imbalance between rural communities and urban communities. So urban communities are often larger, they have more resources, they can purchase data, or they have staff on hand who can analyze data and interpret it for decision making. But rural communities often don't have that capacity. So they don't have resources or they don't have enough staff to gather information and interpret it and use it for decision making. So a big part of what we're trying to do is level that playing field and make it more equitable so that everyone has access to at least the same amount of basic information. And so that information could be useful for decision making. It's been a little challenging. Some organizations are reluctant to share data. So I don't know if people will think of it as disruptive, but it may be seen by some as possibly disruptive. But for the most part, a lot of what we're doing is actually just making publicly available information more accessible. So we do a lot of work with census data, for example. So, that's already publicly available, but it's very large data sets. It's very difficult to work with, and communities often struggle with that. So that's a big part of what we're doing, but we're also trying to draw attention to where there are data gaps. And there are a lot. It's quite shocking, actually, how little information is readily available for communities for decision making. And so on our well-being project, we are looking at um, providing information for a set of indicators that communities could use to assess their well-being. But we're finding that there just isn't a lot of community level data available for really important topics like health, for example. It's really difficult to find community health data. There's data for regions, health regions or public health units, but that data is often not available for local decision making. And so that's sort of what we're trying to work on right now, and it's pretty exciting, actually.
That's really interesting. So it looks like you're doing a lot of work, like you said, in rural communities that's having a greater impact. So we're glad that you guys have sort of taken that up. Sometimes that work gets overlooked a little bit. How important do you feel philanthropic innovation is to the work that you guys are doing?
I think it's really important. So, we're a small nonprofit, and so we do a lot of fundraising and business development, but that takes a lot of time. And so sometimes it's difficult to find a balance between spending time on funding applications or funding proposals versus actually doing the project work that we have committed to for our existing funders. So I think what would be really helpful for us is new models of funding that will guarantee more long-term stability for nonprofits. I think that's maybe one of our biggest challenges is the short-term nature of a lot of different funding applications or grants. So, it's difficult, especially when we're trying to look at long-term data-based projects that will need to be updated and maintained over time. We need to be able to sustain those projects. And if we don't know if we'll have funding to do that, it's a bit uncertain. And so people may be reluctant to participate. They may be reluctant to provide data. They may be reluctant to use that information if they don't feel confident that we'll be able to maintain it over time. So I think, innovation around how funding is delivered, over what time period it's delivered in, and also, the reporting obligations can sometimes be onerous as well. So I think that would be really helpful for us.
Absolutely. I agree. I think the whole ecosystem can definitely benefit from that. So what inspires you most about your current model that you guys have at ROI?
I mean, I think what inspires me most is that we really encourage participation from a wide range of sectors, and we're always looking for partners and collaborators. So we want to make sure that we are helpful, that our work is relevant. So the only way to do that is to actually engage with people and with stakeholders that are interested in that work. So we have a very community focused effort, and we really make sure that all of those diverse voices are heard, and we also try to make sure that we are addressing these big social issues. So for example, we are now looking at including other types of information that we normally wouldn't have included. So one of our dashboards is focused on society, where that information would normally not have been covered by our topics. So normally we would focus more on socioeconomic information, jobs and businesses and things like that. And that's all important information, but people also want to know more about their community socially. What is the social fabric of that community? And I think it's really important to get that information out there and to involve communities in the work that we're doing to make sure that it's helpful and relevant for them. So that's a really key piece of our well-being project actually is community engagement. So we have a focus group of what we call data champions, and we're engaging with them as we develop our project. So we're getting input from them on everything from the design of the dashboard that we're building to the indicators that we have selected to data sources. And also they're going to help us develop knowledge mobilization resources. So, we're really making sure that we are hearing those community voices because at the end of the day, this work isn't about us, it's for them. So if communities don't find this information helpful, then that's not successful for us. So I think the community focus and the community engagement work that we do is really, really great.
That's great. What challenges or barriers do you face in your work at ROI, and how are you and your team working to overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I already touched a little bit on the funding issue. So, we are, again, a small nonprofit. And so we have a small team. We are small but mighty, but, we could always use more funding and more people to do this important work. So, organizationally, I think that's a challenge. But in terms of the actual work that I'm doing, I'm still surprised at how little data is available and how difficult it is to find out what data is available. And I think it's so surprising because we are supposedly in an era of open data where you can access everything at your fingertips and everything's online. And so, in theory, it should be easy to find what you're looking for. But in practice, it's actually really, really difficult. And I think if the point of open data is to make information available to people, but data analysts or data scientists are having a hard time finding stuff, that's probably a sign that something isn't working well. So I think that's an issue. And I think sort of related to that is the reluctance of some agencies to share data. So, a lot of data that is made open may not be what people would need for decision making. So, people like who's making those decisions about what data to make open and what data to sort of keep hidden. And are those agencies being responsive to the needs of people? I don't think it's useful to just release data that no one is using. And I'm not sure, if they're very receptive to hearing what kinds of information people are looking for. So I think that the lack of data has been the biggest challenge and the biggest surprise for me. I really didn't expect that problem to be occurring in 2023. It would be I thought a lot of these problems would be solved by now, honestly, and so it is quite shocking.
Yeah, for sure. There's, I guess you, like you said, 2023, there's no excuse for it. And
Mhm.
if you data experts can't find it, then where does that leave the rest of the population? So I'm glad you touched
Yeah,
on that.
yeah.
Do you,
And
go ahead.
I'm going to say in terms of how to solve them, I realize I didn't answer the second part of your question. Part of what we're trying to do to solve that problem is actually create working relationships with the agencies that do gather and maintain data. So we have developed a really great working relationship with Statistics Canada, for example. I have quarterly meetings with them to discuss rural data needs. And so I think that is very helpful. And so, just trying to build those relationships with other organizations that do own and manage databases is really important. And making sure that people understand how we're using the information, I think is also really important too.
For sure. Do you guys have a key set of priorities that you're working on right now that you'd like to highlight specifically?
So, I mean, I think in terms of priorities, the well-being project is my priority. It's just a project that I'm really excited about. We are always looking for people that want to get involved and want to participate. We're still sort of in the early stages of the project where we're still developing the dashboard and doing a lot of the background work about what indicators we will include in the dashboard. But we also have another data-based project that's really interesting too. So we're working on developing a rural housing information system. And this is a really large project that we started with the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus and are working with a tech company to develop that website. And so I would say in terms of data analysis projects, those are our two big priorities. They're very important projects, and they both are very similar in terms of the problem they're trying to solve, which is just making more data available for rural decision making. Really specifically for housing, because housing is such an issue, and then more generally for just community well-being more broadly. So I think those are our biggest priorities right now. But we're also, looking to possibly expand some of our work like outside of Ontario. So some of the projects that we're doing have the potential for that. And both well-being and housing are sort of set up to be scaled outside of Ontario, possibly. So there is work underway right now to expand the rural housing information system into, I think, Quebec. And we're looking at expanding our well-being project too. I mean, once we're further along into parts of Eastern Canada as well. So we're always looking to, deliver our projects, but also looking to the future to see where we can take these projects. And I think the sky's the limit really on that one.
That's great. Very optimistic outlook on that. We do have a later question. I'll ask it now. What is your ultimate goal with ROI, and what does success look like for you? Would you feel like that's the picture you painted?
Yeah, I mean, I think really, I just hope that communities are able to better understand what's going on and make better decisions. And hopefully our work is helping them do that. I think right now it's really difficult for communities to gather evidence for decision making. And so if we're helping even just one community, feel empowered to make decisions, to track progress over time, to see if they're making improvements in well-being, I think that would be a really big success. And I think a big part of this too is around storytelling. Like if you don't understand what's happening in your community, then you can't speak about it. You can't speak to it. You can't tell people what's going on and what's happening. And not that numbers are everything, but those numbers are often persuasive when you are trying to advocate for something, or when you're trying to make a policy change, or when you're trying to measure progress. So all of that information is critically important, and so that's what I'm hoping for, is that my work will be helpful in that regard.
That's great. And my final question, how do you feel about the future of impact investing in social finance in Canada? You touched on, the challenges of, smaller organizations, not-for-profits and things like that. How do you feel about the future?
Um, Optimistic, I suppose. Hopeful. There's a lot going on, and I think it would be great to be more connected. I think it's hard for us working in the rural sphere sometimes, because we maybe aren't aware of some of the other work that is going on, or people aren't aware of the work that we're doing. And so I think getting the word out there, like what you're helping us do, is really great, and we really appreciate it. And I think that's really important. I think there are a lot of really important social issues that traditional funders, aren't interested in. And so I think it would be really great for us to try to move away from a lot of our government funding to other sources of funding. And I'm really excited and hopeful that we can do that. Not that we don't appreciate our government funders, we absolutely do, and we have really great and really strong relationships with our funders. But it sort of ties us to doing what we have always been doing, and we want to innovate. We want to do new things. We want to do exciting new things, and so we need innovators to help us with that.
Absolutely. Do you have any closing thoughts or additional calls to action for our community?
I mean, calls to action, sure. We're always looking for people that are interested in participating in our projects. Like I mentioned before, if anyone wants to get involved in our well-being project, please get in touch with me. Information is all available on our website. but we're always looking for people to help us guide that project forward. We're looking especially for people from marginalized groups, from racialized groups, from Indigenous communities. We're really interested in hearing from people how we can better serve them.
That's great. Thank you once again. We really appreciate you taking the time to do the interview, and we want to champion the remarkable work that you're doing at ROI as well.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Great. And we're just going to close off the way we started by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we're on, as well as our ancestors and elders, all community stalwarts whose shoulders we're continuing to stand on as we do this great work for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So once again, thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you to our viewers and listeners.